So yeah, the adjustment certainly is something that takes time to get used to.
Yeah.
What about Japanese?
Oh my gosh.
How's that? How was that? How is that?
I think it's different for every individual. But for me, it's been very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm the type of person who is very scared of looking stupid in front of other people. So I'd rather not try.
Yeah, it's sort of like a self-defense, self-preservation thing.
And I would rather just talk to like other ALTs like you.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to deal with that.
No.
But admittedly, this is something that I want to change. Because I will not learn if I am not open to like making a fool of myself every now and then.
It just happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just happens, and I don't know, like it's easier said than done actually, because
do you think this is again though like a pressure that we put on ourselves, but other people aren't expecting it of us?
I think so. I think so, because sometimes like I try to speak to other people and they give me this sort of leeway.
Yeah.
And I'm the one who puts that pressure on myself. I'm like, oh, is this like oh or wow? Like, should I conjugate it like this? Should I? But that is something that is in the textbook. In real conversation, people don't actually talk like that.
No.
It's more like fragments.
Yeah. It is, isn't it? It's well, I think if you broke down certainly the way that I talk, if somebody was actually to analyse my English, they would probably conclude, did this person actually go to school? But further to that, it's people don't actually talk like you know, like your foreign language textbooks. They just don't. It's, I mean, I maybe take a slightly controversial opinion for some linguists, if that's the right word, that, you know, grammar is just an approximation of a spoken language. You know, it's a codification. It's the best job that we can kind of do to describe the functions of a language.
It's like putting logic behind a system
so
that other people from the outside can understand it. But actually, people who speak that language, they already have this system down and they don't even think about it anymore.
This is it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure other languages are like this, so you'd have to excuse my ignorance, but, you know, English I think is a great example of this, because there's so much of it that's idiomatic, which obviously leaves you thinking, what the hell am I on about sometimes? But, you know, if you was to literally break down some of the idiomatic language that I use, I mean, the other one I was saying about the other week, like, we're getting on like a house on fire.
I like, what is she talking about?
You know, surely something really bad's afoot, kind of thing. You know, this sounds terrible. What a tragedy. If you literally broke that down into, there'd be like, well, this doesn't make any sense. You know, something, you're describing a bad event.
Yes.
So how come this is actually a good thing? So there are so many things about all languages that, you know, can't necessarily be explained, at least not very easily. You know, a lot of it is just like, well, that's just the way that we say it.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody, because that's the way that everybody says it, everybody understands, kind of thing. But of course, obviously, if you come from the outside, then you're just like, eh?
Yeah. So I think it's best to just talk and talk and talk and talk to other people until you eventually get it without even thinking about it.
I think so. Yeah. I you know, that I'm sure I've used this analogy before, but I always sort of feel it's a little bit like polishing a stone into like a perfect sphere. You might start out with just a rock with all of its jagged edges, and, you know, it looks nothing like a perfect sphere. But by continually using the language, you kind of polish this, you know, rather misshapen rock into something that does look quite well-rounded and all the rest of it. So it's just a gradual process of continually using it, making mistakes, occasionally making a fool of yourself. I'm just going to walk a little bit more out here. And getting used to it. So where would you say, as far as you're concerned, your Japanese is now?
I feel like, and this is something that I'm very, very frustrated about, I progressed up to the point that I can say very simple sentences, but in a very slow manner. Like, I have to think about it so much before I even say it. And I overthink it. I'm like, but am I saying this wrong? What if they don't understand? So I think I got stuck
Yeah.
I have stopped progressing beyond N4.
Yeah.
I think, because in order to get to the higher levels, you actually have to practice. You have to take that step.
Yeah.
And I've been here for 5 years and I refuse to take that step. Which is, I know it's frustrating. I've thought about this lots of times. But it's something that I have to do sooner or later. At this point, I'm just procrastinating.
Yeah, well, we all do it, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly felt that myself, that, you know, when I first got here, I didn't really have much choice but to really exert a huge amount of energy into the studying, because I really had to have any form of quality of life here. But then after a period of time, it got to the point where I could just about get by, and so the study begins to dip down a bit, doesn't it? And then you kind of stall for a while, I think, don't you? So,
and it's just, it's so boring though. It's so boring to just be by yourself in a room and try to teach yourself, and you don't even know if the thing that you're teaching yourself is right.
Exactly, yeah, this is it. You know, the thought of me like doing my Anki deck someday, I know it's going to do me some good in the long run probably, but the thought of actually sitting down and doing my Anki deck is just like, but I could also just stare out the window and drink some coffee, and it's like, you know, when that becomes a more appealing option, despite the fact that you've probably done it for the last 3 hours already because you've got no classes scheduled that day, you know, you sort of suddenly realise, oh, hang on a minute, you know, like, but
so I am still at the belief that, and this is something that I haven't done despite knowing, is to talk to as many people as you can. Because the people I know who didn't, like, there are some people I know, they didn't study. They don't want to study, they hate studying, but they're good at Japanese because they just have the guts to go for it. I think talk to people.
I think guts is very much the right word. I was thinking about that the other day, that if I was to think of a word that describes what I think it truly takes to learn a language, I think guts is probably the most important thing. That willingness to sometimes look a little bit stupid, but probably only in your own mind. You know, the willingness to make mistakes and learn, and be, and also being very what's the word? Having a sense of humility about it. You know, like, don't go in there with grand expectations that you're going to smash it. Be ready to make mistakes and just take them on the chin almost, and you know, good things come. You know, it does take time. You know, it's easy to chastise yourself, say, well, I've been here for 5 years, how come? Nanska, 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 or yada 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 in English. But yeah, we all go through that. What one thing would you recommend to somebody? So, like, I feel that my situation in terms of Japanese ability was very similar to what you're describing. Like, when I came to Japan, I did an evening school in Japanese, you know, basic sort of jiko shokai, you know, sort of tourist sort of level Japanese, and you obviously did yours. What one bit of advice would you give to somebody who is at that point starting out, that hasn't done a degree majoring in Japanese studies and all this kind of stuff?
I think the best thing to do is to have as many Japanese friends as possible. And if you can do this, just talk in Japanese, purely in Japanese, like, expose yourself to as much Japanese as you can. Maybe even watch some Japanese TV. I don't know, like, because your mind, well, you'll trick your mind into thinking there is no other way to survive and to live, unless, like, it's like you force your way into this thing.
I get it. This is exactly how I feel about it. You know, and actually that's sort of, well, it doesn't lead on to anything, but in a way that's one of the reasons why I feel that if you're thinking of coming to Japan to work, maybe that's as an ALT, maybe it's something else, you know, it doesn't have to be the ALT thing at all, does it? But that's why I honestly feel, for somebody who really does want to learn Japanese, why I think it's the best idea is, despite all of the difficulties that you may encounter and probably will encounter, you're better off being somewhere like this where you have no choice.
You have no choice. I think if I didn't live here, I, like, as little as I know, I wouldn't even know that.
I mean, speaking for myself, I know that would be the case for me.
Yeah.
I would have found some form of English-speaking enclave.
Yes, yes.
You know, and it would. You probably wouldn't know this movie, but there was a movie in the late 40s called Passport to Pimlico, which is a district of London, and it was basically this little area of London that had declared independence from the rest of the UK. And yeah, I sort of feel like I would have declared independence for a small area of, I don't know, Shibuya or something like that.
Yes, I feel like the more you integrate into the society, the more you learn, because you don't have a choice.
No, this is it. I feel somewhere like this does offer you the potential to do that if you take your chances. You know, you take those moves with guts and all the rest of it, you know. Yeah,
and hopefully next year hopefully next year I'll have more practice, because this time really I will not have a choice, because like in high schools you still have the choice to speak in English because they have actual English teachers who are good at English.
They're obviously expected to be of a certain level to teach. Case in point, you see, you know, English speakers get it wrong as well. Me more than most. You know, they have to be of a certain level. So yeah, all of your interactions can be, and the teachers will rightly say to you, look, I don't want you to talk in Japanese to me. I can get that any other time I want. You know, I'm already good at that. I don't need that practice. I want our communication to be in English, and I agree with them. I think, yeah, absolutely. But one of the things I think that has helped me was the fact that I was coming to schools in places like this, where I'd be working with the homeroom teacher, which is a bit like your classroom teacher if you're from the UK, you know, like your main teacher, shall we say, at elementary school age. And those teachers did not know English. You know, there were no bits and pieces, but hand on heart, I think most of them would also say, I can't speak English. So all of my interactions with those teachers in terms of lesson planning, even within the classroom, would be in Japanese. And this gave me lots of opportunity to...
I think if your motivation of going to Japan is to learn as much Japanese as possible, maybe choose junior high or elementary. Never choose high school.
Interesting.
Because in high school, I went on for 5 years without speaking in Japanese.
Wow.
To anybody, because all the teachers talk to me in English.
Like, do you talk to any of the other teachers at the high schools?
I do sometimes, but it's just like bits and pieces.
Fragments here and
fragments.
there.
And of course, mostly the English teachers talk to me. And I have established like good relationships with them. So psychologically, I do not need that sort of connection, because I already have it.
You have it, but just in another language.
By speaking in English. But I think like for junior high and elementary, you will not have any of those connections, because nobody can talk in English.
Yeah, this is it. It's you know, pretty much outside of your Japanese teacher of English, your JTE. You're just not going to have that. So I think it is important. So you know, to have that, you know, that rapport with people. So I think that's a really good point. So that's why. Konnichiwa.
That's why you're way better than me in Japanese, despite being here for like 2 years.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years almost. But you know, I feel a lot more comfortable about doing things like. But you know, it doesn't mean that things are like ordeal. I mean, obviously, like ordeals. I mean, like buying a car, for example.
Oh my goodness.
You know, the amount of months that I spent, you know, thumbing through pages on the internet. You know, what's the process, all this kind of stuff, and I don't know, and eventually I sort of bit the bullet with it, and it was actually relatively straightforward, but you know, like I still struggle very much with I'm getting better at it because I keep on throwing myself into doing it, but talking on the phone I find the hardest bit.
Yes, because you cannot use your hands.
You can't gesture. You can't, there's just so much that you do when you're talking to people face to face, be that through a webcam or literally in person, that, you know, it just isn't there. I mean, even on a webcam it can be difficult because you can't hear the sound properly, but you know, it's a completely different kettle of fish. But yeah, the process of buying a car was by no means just like me going, yeah, let's do this. It was a very sort of slow process for me to, you know, figure it all out and you know, feel comfortable with doing it, kind of thing.
But the thing is, you just did it.
Yeah.
You just did it. That's how you learn. It's not by going through all these websites,
No.
memorizing all these phrases, because when you memorize something, you forget it eventually.
You do.
But when you actually go through buying a car, you attach memories to it.
Yeah, it goes into a place in your brain. I think this is the same for all interactions in whatever language you're trying to learn. So I remember, again, going back to that first week or so that I was in Erima, I very quickly realised that even in Tokyo, nobody was really speaking English.
Nobody, even in Tokyo.
Yeah, you know, like we're talking about one of Tokyo's in awards. So we're not talking about some little, you know, small little place up in West Tokyo kind of thing, which is barely hanging on to the metropolis. We're talking about one of the, you know, Tokyo's 23 wards, and the guy behind the checkout was just like, had no idea what to say to me, because it was quite clear that I had no idea what he was saying to me. I mean, he was basically just asking me, do you want a bag? Do you want this warmed up? I mean, for all I could have known, he was probably saying, would you like to have a zebra playing a kazoo in the store? You know, we'd be quite happy to lay that on for you. I had no idea. But yeah, just trying to get back to the point I was making, apart from zebras playing kazoos. What was I saying?
Yeah, about like heating the thing. Like, you were already in Tokyo, but you still can't find people who can speak in Japanese in English.
Yeah, this is it. So like, for example, you know, I would spend what seemed like hours listening frantically to these videos on YouTube, you know, basic Japanese for restaurants and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Trying to cram this stuff, going like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then you go there and you've forgotten everything. And you're like, you know, you're stood there and you feel incredibly self-conscious. You know, like, I mean, I was so dumb that I didn't even realise there was a bloody ticket machine to get the ramen. I'm just stood there like a lemon, you know, going like, oh no. And then of course eventually somebody, sort of one of the staff goes, better go and help the poor foreigner. And bless them for doing so. And yeah, so although
that's the thing too with studying textbooks, because in real life, people express themselves in many different ways. They don't use this particular pattern.
Yeah, this is
like,
it.
This is how you say it. Like, the textbook would say that, so you memorize that specific phrase.
Exactly.
In real life, people don't always say things that way, and like a slight variation would throw you off.
This is it. Or you might say what you've got to say perfectly based on what the textbook said. That other person understands you, but then you get a response that you're not expecting. Yes. And then you're stuck. Like, for example, I would order something, and then they would ask you, how spicy do you want it? And I'd be like, you know, like, you know, you're okay to the point of actually being able to say what you want, but if there's any further questioning or any further development on that feed, then you come unstuck very quickly. Well, that's what I found with myself anyway, so.
Yeah, because you have to understand that languages function differently, the same as people think differently.
Absolutely.
So you cannot just memorize your way into it.
No, it just doesn't work, does it? Yeah, you can't literally just read your textbook or your dictionary and go out and use it like that. It's you know, like, this is, I mean, I was always a little bit wary of asking that question. What's the one thing you'd recommend to people learning Japanese, yada yada yada? Because I don't think there is one thing really, is there? Yeah. You know, like, I think on YouTube a lot of people will say 5 simple steps to learn Japanese or French or German or whatever it might be, kind of thing. And the truth is that there is no real one thing or 5 simple things. It's a matter of patience and persistence over time,
and just getting used to it.
Getting used to it, hearing it, like you said, the guts to actually go out there and use it and be prepared to make mistakes. Yeah. It's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to kind of discover within yourself, and just keep on persisting with to get somewhere with it, I guess. But I suppose there is a difference also between being functional in a language and, you know, being able to get by on that level, compared to wanting to be fluent or, you know, near as fluent in a language, though, isn't there? So yes. So I
think it depends on the kind of interactions that you have. That's why you would notice that people who mostly have Japanese friends, like, depends on the environment. They know all the phrases and all the words and all the things to use, in that context.
Yes, yeah.
And there are also people who studied like Japanese in schools, so they know how to use Japanese in a certain context.
Yeah,
and these two things are not the same.
They're not, are they?
Yeah.
And this is why I think that idea of guts comes into it again. You have to kind of move outside your comfort zone and do a whole variety of things to be able to gain some degree of confidence, maybe even fluency one day in that area. It's almost as if you're creating pools of fluency in different areas, or at least understanding, because like you say, if I only ever used Japanese in my elementary schools, for example, with the other teachers, I would get good at the kind of conversations I have in the teacher's room.
In that context.
But then if I was to go travelling, for example, and say I'd never done that, and I was going into like a ryokan Japanese inn or a hotel or something like that, I could be completely stumped because I've never had to use that part of the language, shall we say. So, because I don't really go into school and saying, I'd like a room for one, please, or I've got a reservation.
Yeah, so we also shouldn't undermine that aspect of Japanese that we have to study.
Yeah.
Like, because we still have to study it, because if you just throw yourself out there knowing zero Japanese, you don't have a foundation.
Well, no, I mean, I can certainly say that was my experience. I might have learned a bit, but I had no real true foundations, and so I couldn't really say anything because they wouldn't understand me. I could have just gone blah, 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 and I'd have gone like, well, what's that?
you need a certain foundation before you can go out to the world. Like, it doesn't have to be very polished.
No.
Just some words here and there. And this is something that I also learned, like the difference between me learning English and me learning Japanese. Because for me, with English, I understand the entire thing, and there is no way I will be satisfied with my interaction with somebody if I don't understand everything that they're saying.
Yeah.
But with Japanese, you have to learn how to be satisfied with understanding one or two words and just try to predict what they're trying to say.
This is it. You have to use all these kinds of peripheral senses almost.
Yeah, just use your imagination. Like, if I connect this word that I know and this word that I know, what is this person trying to tell me?
I have to do that all the time myself. Like, I just listen as best as I can, and I think I understand that word. What are they likely saying to me? And you just hope to dear God that the way that you respond makes some sense. I mean, in many cases it's not absolutely like mission critical, is it? Occasionally you'll be having a conversation with somebody, say down at the city hall, where giving the wrong answer might have some implications. Like, how much did you earn last year? Oh, I'm really well off. I mean, obviously that's ever happened, but we work for Interact, but but nonetheless, jokes aside, I think that is also part of learning a language, isn't it? It's using that intuition sometimes, and I think that's what helps develop our listening skills as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do get the wrong answer or say the wrong thing, but again, that's just about being willing to make mistakes, because people will always clarify if you've answered completely wrong. If you've taken a guess, like if somebody says to you, like, I don't know, is this your identification card, and you say I like dogs, they're probably going to give it another go. And usually get there in the end. I think I've had plenty of situations where I've answered with something that's completely unconnected to what they've asked me, and they've looked at me a bit strange and then clarified, and I've gone, okay, I've got you. And then I answer, I like cats. Yeah, it's interesting stuff about Japanese. But yeah, we've made it back to Roland again. And there you are, Roland. So I think next what we're going to do is we're going to head off to Morioka, which is our nearest local city.
Yes.
And we'll pick up the conversation there. So yeah.